Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 26. Natalie. My boss called me overqualified. You might think that sounds like a compliment, but no, he said it like an insult, as if my 15 years of industry experience was somehow a problem, as if knowing too much made me dangerous. Turns out, he was right about one thing: I was dangerous. Just not in the way he expected. Under 2 years after that conversation, I watched him clean out his office while my consulting firm handled 3 of his biggest accounts. The same accounts he told me I was too experienced to manage properly. The same clients who chose me over the company that employed us both. But here's what makes this story different from your typical workplace revenge tale. I didn't set out to destroy him. I didn't scheme or plot or plan his downfall. I simply stopped dimming my light to make him comfortable. And when I stopped shrinking, everything he built started looking very, very small. This is the story of how being called overqualified became the greatest gift a toxic boss ever gave me, and how my side hustle became his worst nightmare. Here's what happened. My name is Natalie Sheridan. I'd been at Whitmore Consulting for 7 years when everything changed. 7 years of 12-hour days, weekend client calls, and sacrificing vacations for quarterly deadlines. I'd started as a junior analyst and worked my way up to principal consultant, managing a portfolio worth $18 million annually. Our office sat on the 27th floor of a glass tower in Murray Hill. From my corner desk, I could see the Chrysler Building catching the morning sun. I used to think that view was my reward for years of loyalty. Now I know it was just a distraction from what was really happening around me. My boss, Holloway, had been division head for 3 years. He came from our Chicago office with a reputation for transforming underperforming teams. What the corporate press releases didn't mention was how he achieved those transformations: fear and intimidation. Taking credit for other people's work while systematically destroying anyone who threatened his authority. Derek was the kind of manager who scheduled meetings at 5:45 on Fridays, just to watch people squirm. Does that sound familiar to you too? He was also the kind who would praise you in a group email, then pull you into his office to tear apart the same work in private. He kept a mental list of everyone's vulnerabilities and deployed them strategically whenever he felt his position threatened. I learned early that survival at Whitmore meant becoming invisible. Not too successful, not too visible, not too anything that might attract Derek's attention. This might sound absurd, but I watched colleagues make the mistake of outshining him and saw the consequences over and over again. Their careers didn't end dramatically. They just slowly suffocated under impossible standards, shifting goalposts, and the quiet understanding that no one would defend them, without leaving a trace. But invisibility has a cost. Every time I softened my recommendations so Derek could take credit for the insight. Every time I let him present my analysis as his own. Every time I watched junior consultants learn his toxic patterns because I was too afraid to speak up. Each compromise carved away a piece of who I was. Then, about 3 years ago, I started something on the side. It was like reaching out a hand to my vanishing identity, I think. I created a space where I could be freer and more myself. Nothing dramatic at first. A former client had left her company and was starting her own firm. She needed strategic guidance but couldn't afford big consulting fees. I helped her on weekends, evenings, holidays. No formal arrangement, just one professional helping another. Word spread quickly. Her contacts became my contacts. Small projects turned into steady work. What started as a favor became something real. I called it Murray Hill Strategic Partners. Just me, my laptop, and a growing list of clients who valued expertise over corporate pedigree. I kept my side work completely separate from Whitmore. Different clients, different industries, different everything. I was careful. Religious about boundaries. I never used company resources, never contacted Whitmore clients, never even mentioned my consulting work in the office. As far as anyone knew, I spent my weekends hiking and watching Netflix. For 2 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. My day job funded my life while my side hustle fed my soul. At Whitmore, I was the reliable workhorse who never complained. At Murray Hill Strategic Partners, I was the expert that clients specifically requested. 2 versions of Natalie, neither one complete, but together forming something that felt like freedom. The trouble started at a performance calibration session in March. These sessions were Derek's favorite power play. 23 managers gathered in the large conference room while Derek ranked every consultant against their peers. Public judgment. Public humiliation. He called it transparency. Everyone else called it something unprintable. I walked in expecting the usual routine. Stay quiet, take notes, survive. But this session was different. As I was about to learn, Derek had prepared a presentation specifically about me. The slide appeared on the screen and my stomach dropped. It showed my name next to the word that would change everything. Overqualified. Derek smiled at the room, the kind of smile that precedes a performance. Natalie represents an interesting challenge for our team, he said, his voice carrying that practiced concern that fooled no one. She's been with us 7 years. Excellent technical skills, solid client relationships, but I've been reviewing her trajectory, and I have concerns about fit. 23 people watched as Derek dissected my career on screen. Charts showed my project completion rate, which was excellent. Client satisfaction scores, which were stellar. Billing hours, which exceeded targets consistently. By every metric Whitmore claimed to value, I was succeeding, but metrics weren't Derek's weapon. Narrative was. The issue, he continued, is that Natalie may have outgrown this role. She's overqualified for the work we're giving her, and frankly, that creates tension. Team members feel intimidated. Clients sense her restlessness. It's affecting group dynamics in ways that are hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. I sat frozen in my chair. Years of professional conditioning told me to stay silent, absorb the blow, figure out my response later. But something cracked in me during that meeting. Maybe it was the way Derek's eyes kept darting to mine, checking if I would react. Maybe it was the embarrassed avoidance of colleagues who knew this was wrong but wouldn't risk themselves to say so. Maybe it was simply that after 7 years of shrinking, I had finally run out of room. Wouldn't yours? I raised my hand. Derek's eyebrows lifted. This wasn't in his script. I appreciate the feedback, I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Could you help me understand what specific behaviors are causing these concerns? I'd like concrete examples so I can address them. The room went still. In Derek's world, questions were challenges. Challenges required punishment. This isn't the forum for detailed discussion, he said smoothly. We can schedule time to review privately. Of course, I replied. I'll send you some time options. I just want to make sure I understand the path forward. I was documenting. Even then, even before I understood how bad things would get, some survival instinct kicked in and told me to create a record. To ask questions that would force him to put his accusations in writing. To leave a trail that couldn't be erased or reinterpreted later. Derek moved on to his next target, but I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition. The realization that I might not be as manageable as he'd assumed. I had no idea that meeting would be the beginning of the end. Not my end, though. His. After the session ended, a few colleagues approached me in the hallway. Adrian Reeves from the finance practice, Jennifer Williams from operations. They spoke in low voices, glancing over their shoulders. That was wrong, Adrian said. Everyone knows your numbers are solid. Jennifer nodded. He's threatened by you, always has been. You've been here longer than him. You know the clients better than him. And you don't play his games. I appreciated their words, but I also noticed they'd waited until the room emptied to say them. That's what Derek's management style created. A culture where people whispered support but never spoke it aloud. Where witnesses existed but testimony was too expensive. Thanks, I said. I'll figure it out. But walking back to my desk, I realized something important. Derek hadn't attacked me because I was failing. He'd attacked me because I was succeeding. My expertise made his mediocrity visible. My competence highlighted his incompetence. In his mind, I wasn't an asset. I was evidence. And evidence needed to be eliminated. The weeks after that calibration session were tense but manageable. Derek scheduled our private meeting, then canceled it. Rescheduled, then canceled again. I documented each cancellation, adding every email notification to a private Trello board I'd created called Project Records. Innocent enough if anyone looked, but I knew what it really was. Insurance. Meanwhile, my side business continued to grow. A referral from an existing client led to a contract with a healthcare technology startup. Another introduction connected me with a manufacturing company looking to expand into new markets. My weekend work was becoming a second career, and for the first time, I let myself imagine a future beyond Whitmore's glass tower. But that fantasy shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. I was reviewing a client presentation when Derek appeared at my desk. No warning, no appointment, just his shadow falling across my monitor and his voice cutting through my concentration, making me flinch. My office. Now. I followed him through the open floor plan, feeling 30 pairs of eyes tracking our movement. In Derek's world, public summons meant public consequences. Whatever was coming, he wanted witnesses. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Madison Avenue. He gestured for me to sit in the chair facing his desk, the one positioned slightly lower than his own. Classic power play. I sat anyway. "Close the door," he said. I did. The click of the latch sounded final. Derek leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. Amusement, satisfaction, the look of a cat who'd cornered something smaller than itself. "Murray Hill Strategic Partners," he said. The words hit like a physical blow. I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. How did he know? I'd been so careful. Different email addresses, different phone numbers, no overlap with Whitmore clients. "I don't understand," I said. "Don't insult my intelligence." Derek pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "Your little side project, I've known about it for months." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were printouts. My website, my LinkedIn activity, which I'd thought was private, screenshots of client testimonials, a spreadsheet showing estimated revenue that was remarkably accurate. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "That's not the question you should be asking." Derek smiled. "The question is what I'm going to do with it." I felt the trap closing around me. My employment contract had a non-compete clause. It prohibited me from providing consulting services to companies that could be considered Whitmore competitors. The clause was broadly written, deliberately vague. It could be interpreted to cover almost anything. Derek knew this. He was counting on it. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, leaning forward. "You're going to shut down your little business, terminate all clients, delete the website, and then you're going to focus 100% on your responsibilities here at Whitmore, which I should mention I'll be significantly expanding. And if I refuse, then I take this to legal. They'll review your contract, they'll find violations, and your termination won't just end your career at Whitmore. It'll include a lawsuit that follows you wherever you go." The threat hung in the air between us. Derek wasn't bluffing. He had the power to destroy everything I'd built. Both versions of my career, erased with a single decision. But as I sat in that deliberately lower chair, staring at the evidence of his surveillance, something unexpected happened. I stopped being afraid. I had crossed that threshold. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation. Here was a man who routinely stole credit from his subordinates, who created hostile environments as management strategy, who had just admitted to monitoring my private activities for months. And he expected me to be the one who felt ashamed? "I need to think about this," I said. "You have until Friday. I'll let you know." I stood up, gathered the folder of his surveillance, and walked toward the door. "Leave that," Derek said sharply. "No." I turned to face him. "You've given me documentation of how you've been tracking my personal activities outside of work hours. I think I'll keep it." For the first time in that conversation, Derek looked uncertain. He hadn't expected me to take the evidence. He'd expected me to cower, apologize, beg for mercy. The same reaction he'd gotten from everyone else he'd ever threatened. But I wasn't everyone else. Not anymore. I walked back to my desk with the folder tucked under my arm. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Derek had just made a critical mistake. He'd shown me his cards, revealed his strategy, and given me a timeline. Friday. 4 days to figure out my response. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Torres, employment law specialist. A former colleague had recommended her after surviving their own workplace nightmare. Rachel listened to my story, reviewed my contract, and asked a question that changed everything. "This surveillance folder," she said. "How did Derek access your private LinkedIn activity, your website analytics? This level of information suggests he either hired someone to investigate you or he's been accessing your personal accounts without authorization." To be honest, I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on the threat to my side business that I'd missed the bigger picture. Derek hadn't just discovered my consulting work. He'd been systematically violating my privacy to gather ammunition. What does that mean? I asked. It means he may have broken the law to threaten you for potentially breaking your contract, Rachel said, and it means we have options. Over the next 2 days, Rachel helped me understand my situation. My non-compete clause was aggressive, but potentially unenforceable. New York courts had become increasingly skeptical of broad restrictions on employee mobility. The key question was whether my side business actually competed with Whitmore. It didn't. My clients were small startups and independent businesses. Whitmore served Fortune 500 companies. There was no overlap in market segment, service type, or geographic focus. The only competition Derek could claim was the competition for my time and energy. More importantly, Rachel identified several potential violations in Derek's behavior: unauthorized access to personal accounts, workplace surveillance without disclosure, the use of confidential information for personal intimidation. Any one of these could form the basis of a complaint. But here's what I want you to understand, Rachel said during our second call. You can win this. You can fight Derek and probably come out ahead. But fighting is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally exhausting. Sometimes the best victory isn't the one you win in court. It's the one you win by building something better. I thought about her words all night. She was right. Part of me didn't want to let Derek get away with this. Part of me wanted to see his righteous downfall and taste his defeat. I could spend the next year locked in legal battles with Derek and Whitmore. I might even win. But what would I have left at the end? A job I hated, a reputation as someone who sued their employer, an endless supply of Derek Holloways waiting to make my life miserable. Was that really where I wanted to pour all my energy, my focus, and my time? Or I could take a different path. Friday morning, I walked into Derek's office. He smiled when he saw me, certain of my surrender. I've made my decision, I said. I'm glad you've come to your senses. I'm resigning. The smile froze on Derek's face. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this. Effective in 2 weeks, I continued. I'll complete the transition of my current accounts and document all active projects. After that, I'll be pursuing opportunities elsewhere. You can't just quit. Derek's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Your non-compete clause prohibits consultation work for 2 years after departure. Actually, that clause is almost certainly unenforceable under New York law, but I'm not worried about that. I placed an envelope on his desk. This is a formal complaint documenting your unauthorized surveillance of my personal accounts, your use of that information for workplace intimidation, and your creation of a hostile work environment. I'm submitting copies to HR, legal, and the CEO's office. Derek opened the envelope. His face went pale as he read the detailed documentation. Every email he'd sent, every meeting he'd canceled, every word from our conversation, all organized and annotated with legal analysis. This is nonsense, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Maybe, but it's well-documented nonsense, and I suspect your surveillance activities weren't exactly authorized by corporate leadership. I stood. I'll be at my desk if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll see you at my farewell lunch. The 2 weeks that followed were the strangest of my career. Derek avoided me completely, which was a first. No hostile emails, no passive-aggressive meeting invites, just silence from the corner office while whispers spread through the floor. People noticed. In 7 years, I'd never seen Derek back down from anyone. His absence from my work life was itself a statement. Something had shifted in the power dynamic, and everyone could feel it. Adrian Reeves stopped by my desk on my third-to-last day. Whatever you did, he said quietly, it worked. Derek's been asking HR about early retirement packages. I didn't do anything. I said, I just stopped pretending his threats were scarier than they actually were. Adrian shook his head slowly. You know, I've been here 11 years. 11 years of watching people like Derek run this place into the ground. I always told myself I'd push back eventually. Find the right moment. Build up enough security to take the risk. And the moment never came. There was always another mortgage payment, another kid's tuition, another reason to keep my head down. He met my eyes. You're braver than you know. I wanted to tell him I wasn't brave, that I'd only acted because Derek had backed me into a corner, that if he'd left me alone, I would have kept shrinking indefinitely, too afraid to claim my own life. But I also knew that wasn't entirely true. Something had been building in me for years, all those compromises, all those moments of self-erasure. They'd accumulated like pressure in a sealed container. Derek's ultimatum didn't create my courage, it just gave it somewhere to go. My last day at Whitmore was surprisingly quiet. I couldn't help but look around the place, remembering both the good and bad days. When I thought about never having to set foot there again, I felt a wave of relief. I packed my personal items into 2 small boxes. I said goodbye to colleagues who promised to stay in touch, knowing most wouldn't. I took one last look at the Chrysler building through my corner window. Derek never appeared. I heard later that he'd taken a personal day. That weekend, I officially launched Murray Hill Strategic Partners as my full-time business. The clients I'd been serving on nights and weekends became my primary focus. The systems I'd built for side income became infrastructure for real growth. Everything I'd been doing in shadows, I now did in daylight. The transition wasn't seamless or easy. My income dropped dramatically those first few months. I burned through savings faster than projected. There were nights when I stared at my ceiling, wondering if I'd made the worst mistake of my professional life. But there was something else too. For the first time in years, I woke up excited about work. No more calibrating my success to avoid threatening insecure managers. No more translating my expertise into their vocabulary. No more shrinking. Despite all the doubt and fear inside me, I felt free. I threw myself into building something real, refined my service offerings based on what clients actually needed, developed partnerships with specialists in complementary fields, created content that demonstrated my expertise instead of hiding it. All the potential I'd been suppressing for so long seemed to have been waiting for this very moment to reveal itself. Word spread faster than I expected. Former Whitmore clients started calling, not because I'd solicited them, but because they'd heard I was available. The manufacturing company I'd helped on weekends referred me to 3 of their suppliers. The healthcare startup's CEO introduced me to her network of fellow founders. 6 months after leaving Whitmore, Murray Hill Strategic Partners had more revenue than my salary had been. By the end of the year, I was turning down projects because I didn't have capacity. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. A contact at a major pharmaceutical company reached out about a strategic assessment project, big budget, prestigious client. Exactly the kind of work Whitmore would have fought to win. "How did you hear about me?" I asked during our initial call. "Actually, through one of your former colleagues, Jennifer Williams. She's been recommending you to everyone." Jennifer, the operations manager who'd whispered support in the hallway after Derek's attack. She'd left Whitmore 3 months after I did, and was now building her own consulting practice. Jennifer and I reconnected over coffee, then dinner, then a partnership that would reshape both our businesses. Jennifer brought operational expertise and Fortune 500 connections. I brought strategic vision and startup agility. Together, we could compete for projects neither of us could have tackled alone. "You know what's funny?" Jennifer said during one of our planning sessions. "Derek used to tell me I was too detail-oriented to see the big picture, that I should focus on execution and leave strategy to people who understood it. He told me I was too strategic, that I needed to get better at implementation details." We looked at each other and burst out laughing. Derek had used our complementary strengths as weapons to keep us separate, isolated, easier to control. He never imagined we'd combine them against the very system he'd built. Our partnership attracted attention. Other Whitmore refugees reached out. Some wanted advice. Others wanted to join. Within a year, Murray Hill Strategic Partners had grown from a solo practice to a team of 7 consultants, 3 of whom had escaped Derek's division. We weren't just building a business. We were building proof that his approach didn't work. That talent didn't need to be terrorized into performance. That excellence could thrive without fear. Derek noticed. Of course he did. Whitmore started losing competitive bids to us. Not often at first, just occasionally, but the pattern was unmistakable. Clients who had worked with Derek's team were choosing our firm instead. Sometimes they told us why. Better responsiveness, more creative solutions, actually listening to what they needed instead of selling them predetermined packages. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had called me overqualified as an insult. Now that same expertise was eating into his market share. I heard through industry contacts that Derek had tried to invoke my non-compete clause. He'd pushed Whitmore's legal department to send a cease and desist letter. It was clear he was carrying a personal vendetta against me. But Rachel Torres had been right. The clause was unenforceable, especially given my documented complaint about his surveillance. Whitmore's lawyers had apparently advised against any action that might prompt me to file a more formal lawsuit. So Derek watched from his corner office as everything he'd built started to crumble, not because I'd destroyed it, because I'd stopped participating in its maintenance. The pivotal moment came on a Wednesday afternoon in October, almost exactly 18 months after my resignation. I was reviewing proposals in my home office when Jennifer called. Her voice had an edge I'd learned to recognize as barely contained excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Meridian Pharmaceuticals just sent out an RFP for a major strategic restructuring project. 3-year engagement. 8 figures. Meridian." My heart rate picked up. Meridian had been one of Whitmore's anchor clients for over a decade. Their account had been Derek's crown jewel, the evidence he used to justify every management decision, every terminated career, every moment of workplace cruelty. "They're looking for fresh perspectives," Jennifer continued. "And guess whose name they specifically mentioned wanting on the proposal team? No. Yes." I couldn't believe it. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what this meant. Meridian hadn't just decided to explore new consulting options. They'd specifically requested Murray Hill strategic partners. They wanted me. It was incredibly exciting and motivating. Over the next 2 sleepless weeks, we assembled the most comprehensive proposal our firm had ever created. Every insight I'd developed during 7 years at Whitmore. Every lesson I'd learned building my own practice. Every strength our team of refugee consultants brought to the table. We submitted on the deadline. Then we waited. The notification came 3 weeks later. We'd made the final round, us and 2 other firms. One was a boutique practice from Boston. The other was Whitmore Consulting, represented by Derek Holloway himself. The final presentation was scheduled for Meridian's headquarters in Midtown. All 3 firms would present on the same day, back to back, with the selection committee choosing their partner by the end of the week. I hadn't seen Derek since walking out of his office with my complaint documentation. 18 months of building something new, something better, and now I'd be presenting directly against the man who tried to destroy me. I was tense. For a moment, I remembered the fear and the urge to shrink that I used to feel during meetings with Derek. Jennifer sensed my tension during our preparation. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're thinking about Derek." I sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to everyone who's ever met you." She pulled up a chair beside me. "Look, I get it. Part of you wants to crush him, to prove that everything he said about you was wrong, to watch his face when he realizes his best client chose his biggest nightmare over him. Part of me? Okay, maybe more than part." Jennifer smiled. "But here's what I've learned about revenge over the past 1.5 years. The best kind isn't about hurting them. It's about becoming someone they can't touch, someone who succeeds not because of anger, but despite it." She was right. I'd spent years letting Derek live rent-free in my head, planning comebacks to conversations that had already ended, imagining his face when he finally understood what he'd lost. But that wasn't why I'd built Murray Hill Strategic Partners. I'd built it because I was tired of shrinking, because I wanted to do excellent work with excellent people, because I believed expertise should be valued, not feared, and because I'd chosen not to stay stuck on what happened with Derek. "We're going to win this," I said. "Not because of what it does to Derek, because we're the best choice for Meridian." Now you're thinking clearly. The day of the presentation arrived cold and bright. November in Manhattan, the kind of weather that makes everything feel sharper. We arrived at Meridian's headquarters early. Security directed us to a waiting area on the executive floor. As we settled in, the elevator doors opened. Derek Holloway stepped out. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. I couldn't remember why he had once scared me so much. I wondered if he had changed at all, maybe matured even a little. The confident stride I'd once found intimidating now seemed forced, like a performance he'd rehearsed too many times. Our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Natalie, his voice was carefully neutral. Derek, he glanced at Jennifer, at the portfolio cases we carried, at the quiet confidence of a team that had nothing to prove to him. Interesting approach, he said, building a company out of people who couldn't make it at Whitmore. I had my answer. He hadn't changed at all. Actually, Jennifer replied, we built it out of people who could make it anywhere. That's why we chose to make it here. Derek's jaw tightened. He turned and walked toward the conference room without another word. Whitmore presented first. We watched through the glass walls as Derek commanded the room, as we knew all too well, gesturing at slides filled with corporate jargon and impressive-sounding metrics. The same safe and predictable presentation style. Exactly what Meridian had been seeing for the past decade. Then it was our turn. I walked into that conference room with my head high. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something Derek never had. Expertise isn't a threat. It's a gift you bring to the people who value it. Our presentation was different. Instead of telling Meridian what we thought they needed, we asked questions. Instead of showcasing our credentials, we demonstrated our curiosity. Instead of promising outcomes, we mapped possibilities. The selection committee leaned forward. They engaged. They pushed back. They treated us like partners instead of vendors. Afterward, the CEO walked us to the elevator. I've worked with Whitmore for 11 years, she said. Derek's team is competent, professional, but somewhere along the way they stopped being hungry, stopped questioning assumptions. She shook my hand. I'll be in touch. 3 days later, Murray Hill Strategic Partners won the Meridian contract. 8 figures. 3 years. The biggest account Derek had ever managed. Now ours. I learned later what happened at Whitmore. The loss triggered a review of Derek's entire division. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Departing talent. Declining client retention. A toxic culture that had been hemorrhaging value for years while Derek blamed everyone but himself. He wasn't fired. That would have been too clean. Instead, he was offered a choice. Early retirement with a modest package, or reassignment to a role with no direct reports and no client contact. He chose retirement. That was 2 years ago. Today, Murray Hill Strategic Partners has 23 consultants and a client roster that includes 4 Fortune 500 companies. Jennifer runs operations while I handle strategy. We've opened a second office in Chicago, right down the street from where Derek used to work. I still see the Chrysler building from my window. Different angle now. Better view. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Derek had left me alone, if he'd never threatened my side business, never forced me to choose between shrinking and growing. Derek didn't destroy me. He liberated me. And the irony is he'll never understand that. If you're facing your own Derek, I want to share the most important lesson I've learned with you. Understand that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's construction. Building something better, becoming someone they can't touch, proving that their limitations don't have to become yours. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full orange file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.